A 14-year-old girl, still too young to understand the weight of her actions, was about to change the lives of everyone around her. A brutal murder, a crime so horrifying that it would shake the very foundation of her community. And the most shocking part? The girl who was accused of committing this atrocity was someone everyone thought they knew. Who could have predicted it? A child, barely a teenager, was now standing in front of the authorities, the accusation heavy against her. But the question everyone asked was simple. How could she do it? How could someone so young, so innocent, be capable of such violence? The streets were quiet, but the tension in the air was palpable. The girl, barely able to look anyone in the eye, stood there, a blank expression on her face. The neighborhood, once so welcoming, had now become a scene of disbelief and fear. Her name was whispered in hushed tones, her face framed by long braids, her eyes dark with uncertainty. No one could have imagined that this sweet, shy girl was capable of committing such a crime. Yet, as the truth began to unfold, it became clear that this wasn't a case of a girl simply snapping. No, this was far more complicated. There was a history, a series of events, struggles, and secrets that had built up to this tragic moment. But those details, hidden beneath the surface, were still waiting to be discovered. What made her do it? Detective Michael Green leaned back in his chair, staring at the file in front of him. It was thick with evidence, and yet it felt as though it told only half the story. At 45, with graying hair and a steady demeanor, Michael had seen his fair share of crimes. But nothing quite like this. He couldn't understand it. There had to be more, something that connected the pieces of this puzzle. But what? The girl's family had been interviewed, her friends questioned, but the answers they gave were far from satisfying. Her mother, a hard-working woman who had always kept to herself, seemed distant and cold. Her father, a man known for his temper, had disappeared after the incident, leaving the community to wonder if his absence was more than just a coincidence. Neighbors spoke of a quiet home, a place where the girl often stayed in her room alone, with only the glow of a computer screen to keep her company. But there were whispers of strange behavior, of dark moods that no one had ever really questioned. Could these be signs? Or were they just typical teenage troubles? As the investigation began to take shape, the question on everyone's mind remained the same. What caused a young girl just starting to figure out who she was to commit such a heinous act? Was it anger? Despair? Or something even darker? But the more they dug, the more they realized. This crime was not as simple as it seemed. Is she guilty? That question hung in the air as the investigation continued. And with every answer they found, more questions emerged. A torn family, a broken past, and a future now hanging in the balance. What was the real truth behind this tragedy? In the weeks that followed, the community tried to come to terms with what had happened. News outlets swarmed the area, turning the small, quiet neighborhood into a spectacle. The girl's story became a national headline. Everyone wanted to know the details. The media painted her as a monster, but what if they were wrong? What if the truth was far more complex? What if we're missing something? Michael thought as he stared at the case file late one night. The girl's confession, or lack thereof, seemed almost too rehearsed. Was she hiding something? Or was she just too young to understand the gravity of her actions? The chilling silence that followed her every step was telling. It was as though she had already accepted the consequences before they even came. But could it be that simple? Just then a call came through. The lead detective's voice crackled over the phone. "We found something. You need to see this." With that, Michael's mind raced. Could this be the break they had been waiting for? Or would it only lead them deeper into the mystery of why a 14-year-old girl, too young to understand the world fully, had chosen to take the life of another? The investigation was just beginning. But one thing was certain. The truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. And as the community braced itself for the shocking details to come, they could only wonder one thing. Who was the real victim in all of this? But as the investigation unfolds, one truth begins to emerge. Everyone has something to hide. The news spread quickly. Within hours, the quiet town was in chaos. Neighbors, friends, and strangers alike gathered in clusters, exchanging whispered theories and speculations about the young girl's involvement in the crime. The once peaceful neighborhood was now a crime scene, its residents paralyzed by shock. It had all started with a phone call, a call that no one ever expects to receive. A frantic voice on the other end, a scream that was impossible to ignore. The body of a local businessman had been discovered in his home, brutally murdered. No one could have imagined that the person responsible would be so close to them, one of their own. Detective Michael Green was the first on the scene, his mind already racing through the possible scenarios as he made his way toward the house. The windows were dark, the front door wide open, a chilling sign that something was terribly wrong inside. He could already see the flashing blue lights from the police cars reflecting against the pavement as officers moved in and out of the house. Michael had handled his share of tough cases, but something about this one felt different. There was an underlying sense of unease, a feeling that no matter how much he learned, he would never truly understand why someone so young would commit such a brutal act. He had been a detective for years, but this case was more personal than anything he had dealt with before. The girl, the one at the center of it all, was just a child. It seemed impossible. As Michael stepped into the house, the weight of the situation pressed down on him. The living room was eerily quiet, the scent of death still thick in the air. He took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the surroundings, looking for anything that could give him a clue. The body of the businessman lay in the middle of the floor, his face pale and his body contorted in a way that only someone who had experienced unimaginable pain could have. The murder weapon was a knife, a large, gleaming blade stained with blood. But what struck Michael the most wasn't just the weapon, it was the positioning of the body. It didn't seem like a random attack. There was a method to the madness, a pattern. The victim had been stabbed multiple times, but there was something unsettling about the nature of the wounds. Each cut was deliberate, precise, almost calculated. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime. Whoever did this had planned it out, whether consciously or subconsciously. And that terrified Michael even more. As he knelt down next to the body, his mind was racing. Who could have done this? And more importantly, why? He was interrupted by a soft voice behind him. Detective Green. Turning around, he saw Officer Jenny Lawson, a young officer who had been with the department for a few years. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she held a piece of paper in her hand. "We found something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a note." Michael stood up and walked toward her, taking the note from her hands. It was crumpled, clearly thrown aside in haste. He opened it slowly, reading the words scrawled on the paper. "I did it, but I didn't mean to. I had to. He was going to hurt me." The words sent a chill down his spine. They were written by the girl, the one who had been arrested earlier that day. It was her handwriting. "Is she confessing?" Jenny asked, her voice trembling. Michael didn't answer right away. He had seen confessions before, but this didn't feel like one. It felt more like a cry for help, a plea to be understood. The words weren't cold or calculated. They were desperate, pleading for someone to listen. He folded the note carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket. The implications of what it meant began to settle in. This wasn't a simple case of a girl acting out. There was something much deeper at play here. Something that needed to be uncovered before any more lives were destroyed. As Michael stepped outside, the sound of sirens filled the air, and the crowd that had gathered around the house seemed to be growing larger by the minute. The media had arrived, their cameras flashing, capturing every moment of the chaos unfolding before them. They wanted answers, but there were none to give. Not yet. "Detective!" a reporter shouted, pushing through the crowd to get closer to Michael. "What can you tell us about the girl? What's her motive? Was this a robbery gone wrong?" Michael didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked toward his car, his mind focused on the note in his pocket. It wasn't much, but it was enough to change everything. The girl hadn't just killed someone, she had a reason. A reason that, so far, no one had been able to uncover. But Michael was determined to find out. And no matter where the investigation led, he knew one thing for sure. This case was far from over. As the investigation continues, the truth behind the girl's confession begins to unravel, revealing a story far more complex than anyone could have imagined. Detective Michael Green couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the case. He had seen plenty of murders in his career, but something about this one gnawed at him, tugging at the edges of his thoughts like an itch he couldn't quite scratch. The more he investigated, the more questions piled up, questions that didn't have clear answers, and more importantly, the girl's confession was beginning to haunt him. The note she had left, "I did it, but I didn't mean to. I had to. He was going to hurt me," was still in his pocket, a constant reminder that the truth wasn't as simple as it seemed. The girl's words were as cryptic as they were chilling. Who was she really? What had driven her to take such a drastic step? Michael spent the next few days going through every piece of evidence they had on the case, trying to fit together the puzzle. He combed through the victim's life, his finances, his relationships, and his connections with the community. The businessman, Samuel Hargrave, was well known, a pillar of the community. A successful man in his mid-40s with a family of his own, Samuel had no known enemies, at least not on the surface. But as Michael dug deeper, he discovered something that made him pause. Hargrave had been a mentor to the young girl, the accused. Her name was Vanessa Clark. A teenager with a troubled past, she had been through foster homes, troubled relationships, and battles with addiction. She had always been considered a lost cause by most of the people around her, but Samuel Hargrave had seen something in her. He had taken her under his wing, offering her guidance and support when no one else would. Michael couldn't ignore the connection between the two. Samuel had been a mentor to many, but it seemed there was something more personal between him and Vanessa. His office records showed that they had met often, and some of the emails between them were filled with discussions of her future, her potential, and even personal advice. Could Vanessa have killed him out of some twisted sense of betrayal or fear? Or was there something more sinister at play here? One particular detail caught Michael's attention. During one of their last meetings, Samuel had written Vanessa a letter that seemed out of place. The letter, found in his desk drawer, was filled with advice, but also a clear boundary. It warned Vanessa about a particular habit she had, her tendency to lie, to hide the truth. It was a warning, but also a plea for her to come clean about whatever was weighing on her heart. The letter had been a part of their last conversation, one that had taken place just days before his death. But it wasn't the content of the letter that bothered Michael, it was the tone. Samuel had been trying to help, yes, but he was also pulling away, distancing himself from her. Could this be the trigger that set Vanessa off? Michael's thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of his phone. It was Officer Jenny Lawson again. "Detective, we've got more news," Jenny said, her voice tense. "We found something that might explain the motive." "What is it?" Michael asked, his mind already running through a list of possibilities. "There's an anonymous tip. Someone called in saying they saw Vanessa leaving the scene of the crime the night of the murder," Jenny explained. "But here's the kicker. This person claims she wasn't alone. They saw her with someone else." Michael's heart skipped a beat. This was the break he had been waiting for. He had a gut feeling that there was more to this case than just a teenage girl committing murder. If Vanessa had an accomplice, it could change everything. Who was she with? Michael asked urgently. Jenny paused, a brief silence on the other end before she responded, "We don't know yet. The witness was too far away to get a good look at the other person. But they did say it was a man. Someone tall, wearing a hoodie." Michael cursed under his breath. A mystery accomplice. This was exactly what he had been afraid of. He couldn't afford to make assumptions, but the thought of Vanessa working with someone else twisted his gut. It meant the entire investigation had just taken a turn. "Get me everything on this witness," Michael ordered. "And start looking into anyone who might have been involved with Vanessa recently, friends, acquaintances, anyone who could have influenced her." As he hung up, Michael's mind was racing. The more he learned, the more convoluted the case seemed. Vanessa's troubled past, her connection to Samuel Hargrave, the mysterious accomplice. It was all a tangled web of lies, secrets, and hidden motivations. Michael needed answers, and he needed them fast. He couldn't afford to wait for more tips to come in. If Vanessa had been manipulated, he had to find out who had done it, and why. That evening, Michael sat down with his partner, Detective Clara Rodriguez, to go over everything they had learned so far. Clara was sharp, methodical, and always quick to point out details that others might miss. "We're not dealing with an open-and-shut case here," Michael said as he slid the file across the table to Clara. "We've got a troubled teenager who killed a respected businessman, and no one really knows why. We're missing something." Clara took a long look at the case file, flipping through the pages of evidence. "We know that Vanessa's got a troubled past, but she also had a connection with Samuel Hargrave. He tried to help her even after everything she'd been through. Maybe she felt like she owed him something." Michael leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "But why kill him? Why stab him like that? It doesn't add up." Clara paused, thinking. Maybe she felt betrayed. Maybe she thought Samuel was trying to control her life. "There's always a reason for murder, Michael. We just have to find it." The two detectives sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts, until Michael finally spoke again. "We're missing something important. I can feel it. I think it's time we take another look at Vanessa." The deeper they dug, the more tangled the web became, and with every new clue the mystery grew darker. Was Vanessa really the killer, or was someone pulling her strings from the shadows? The investigation was progressing, but the more Michael Green delved into the case, the less it seemed to make sense. The trail was growing colder by the minute, and the more they uncovered about Vanessa's past, the murkier the waters became. As he sat in his office, going over the list of her acquaintances, something began to stir in the back of his mind. It wasn't just about the murder anymore. It was about Vanessa, who she was and what might have happened in those final moments before Samuel Hargrave's death. The anonymous tip had pointed them in a new direction, but it was far from enough to make an arrest. Michael knew that if he didn't find the answers soon, this case would slip into the pile of unsolved mysteries. He needed more. He decided to meet with Vanessa's mother, Margaret Clark. Margaret had always kept a low profile, but now she was thrust into the public eye, her daughter's name splashed across the front pages of every newspaper. Michael hoped that by sitting down with her he could learn more about Vanessa's childhood, the struggles she had faced, and possibly uncover the key that would unlock this case. Margaret was waiting for him in her modest home. The walls were adorned with pictures of her family, and the smell of old coffee lingered in the air. She greeted him with a tired smile, but there was a sadness in her eyes that seemed to be ever present, as though she had been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders for years. "Detective Green," she said, her voice strained. "Thank you for coming. I don't know what you expect me to say, but she's my daughter. I just want to know why." Michael took a seat at the kitchen table, his gaze lingering on a framed photograph of a young Vanessa. She was smiling, happy, unburdened by the darkness that would later consume her life. "I'm just here to ask you a few questions, Mrs. Clark," Michael said gently. "We're trying to piece together what happened that night. I need to understand more about Vanessa. Her life, her past. Maybe there's something I'm missing." Margaret's eyes seemed to well with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. "Vanessa has always been a difficult child. Ever since she was little, she'd get into trouble, school, friends, even at home. I did my best, but sometimes it felt like I couldn't reach her." Michael nodded, acknowledging her pain. "What about Samuel Hargrave? Did Vanessa ever mention him? How did they meet?" Margaret hesitated. "He was a good man, detective. He helped Vanessa when no one else would. But," she trailed off, searching for the right words, "he became more than a mentor to her. I think she relied on him too much. Maybe she thought he was the only one who cared. And then, when he started pulling away, I think she felt abandoned." Michael's gut twisted as he listened to Margaret's words. It sounded like a classic case of attachment gone wrong. But was it enough to drive Vanessa to murder? Or was there something more? Something darker? "Did Vanessa ever talk to you about any conflicts with Samuel?" Michael asked, keeping his voice neutral. "Any arguments or fights?" Margaret shook her head. "No, nothing like that. But she was angry. So angry. I didn't know what to do anymore. And then, when I found out what she'd done," her voice cracked and she looked away, unable to finish the sentence. The silence between them hung heavy in the room. Michael felt for Margaret. Her pain was raw, and he could see how much she wanted to understand what had happened to her daughter. But Michael had his own questions now. Could a mother's love cloud her judgment? Could she see something in Vanessa that was not there? After a few moments, Michael stood up. "Thank you for your time, Mrs. Clark. We'll continue the investigation. If you remember anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out." Margaret nodded, but her expression remained distant, as if her mind was somewhere far away. As Michael left the house, he felt an unease settle over him. Margaret's words about Vanessa's anger and her dependence on Samuel Hargrave weighed heavily on him. But there was still so much more he needed to learn. Something wasn't adding up. Back at the station, Michael and his partner, Detective Clara Rodriguez, sat down to go over the latest developments. The more they discussed the case, the more it seemed as though everyone had a piece of the puzzle, but no one had the full picture. Vanessa's troubled past, her connection to Samuel, and the mysterious accomplice were all swirling in Michael's mind, and he knew they had to find something solid soon, or the case would fall apart. Clara pushed a stack of papers toward him. "We've been talking to the people in her life, but what about her friends? Her social circle? Anyone who could have been influencing her lately?" Michael picked up the papers and started scanning them. There were names, phone numbers, and addresses, all pointing to a group of people Vanessa had been associating with in the weeks leading up to Samuel's death. One name stood out, Corey Matthews, a young man who had recently entered Vanessa's life. They had been spotted together multiple times in the days before the murder, and according to several witnesses, they had been seen leaving Samuel's house late at night. Corey Matthews, Michael muttered to himself. Let's pay him a visit. They tracked Corey down to a rundown apartment on the edge of town. The building was dimly lit, and the air smelled of something stale. As Michael and Clara approached the door, they could hear muffled voices inside. Michael knocked firmly, and after a moment, the door creaked open. Corey Matthews stood there, his eyes bloodshot, his face marked by the kind of exhaustion that came from a troubled life. Detective Green, Michael said, flashing his badge. We need to talk. Corey stepped aside, letting them in. I already told you guys everything I know, he said, his voice rough. I don't know why you keep coming back. We're just trying to piece everything together, Michael replied, watching Corey carefully. We know you were with Vanessa the night Samuel Hargrave was killed. We know you were seen leaving his house with her. Corey stiffened. Look, I didn't do anything. I wasn't involved in that murder. Vanessa, she was freaking out. She was saying some weird stuff, but I didn't have anything to do with it. I swear. Michael's eyes narrowed. This was the break he had been waiting for. Tell me everything you know about Vanessa. Everything. Corey hesitated for a moment, as if weighing his options. She was getting close to Hargrave. Too close. But she didn't trust him. Not completely. She thought he was using her. And then, after he started pushing her away, he trailed off, a dark look crossing his face. Michael leaned in. What happened after that? Corey's gaze shifted, as though he was deciding whether or not to reveal more. I don't know. But she was different after that night. And after she came back, she was just, I don't know. She was shaken. But she didn't say anything to me. Just that she had done it. As the investigation unfolds, Michael realizes the truth may not be what it seems. Was Vanessa truly the killer, or was she a pawn in a much larger game? The investigation had taken a dark turn, and Michael Green knew that the pieces of the puzzle were slowly falling into place, though they were not yet fully aligned. With every step, the truth seemed to slip further away, buried beneath layers of secrets and lies. Each new piece of evidence raised more questions than it answered, and the deeper Michael dug into Vanessa's past, the more unsettled he became. The phone call from Officer Jenny Lawson was a turning point. Michael had been on his way back to the station, his mind racing with the new information about Corey Matthews, when Jenny's voice on the other end of the line snapped him back to reality. Detective Green, Jenny said urgently, we've got something you need to see. It's a piece of evidence we didn't know we had. Michael's heart skipped a beat. He had been chasing leads all week, but every lead so far had felt like a dead end. This was different. This was the kind of breakthrough he had been waiting for. He arrived at the station within minutes. Jenny was waiting for him with a large folder, her face a mix of excitement and tension. We just received this from the lab, she explained, handing him the folder. It's a recording, taken from Samuel Hargrave's office security cameras the night of his murder. It wasn't flagged initially because we thought it was irrelevant, but after looking over the timeline again, it seems critical. Michael opened the folder, feeling a surge of anticipation. As he unfolded the paper, he noticed a small USB drive inside. He didn't waste a second. Plugging the drive into his laptop, Michael waited for the video footage to load. The screen flickered, and then a grainy image of Samuel Hargrave's office appeared. The timestamp at the bottom of the screen showed it was just hours before the murder. Michael leaned forward, eyes fixed on the screen. At first, the video showed nothing unusual. The office was quiet, the lights dimmed, and the faint sound of distant traffic could be heard. But then, a figure entered the frame. A young woman, her face obscured by the low light, but Michael could tell immediately it was Vanessa. She moved toward Samuel's desk, her steps cautious, almost deliberate. Michael's breath caught as he watched her approach. It was the first time he had seen her in such a setting, calm, focused, and in control. She was no longer the terrified teenager he had seen in the interviews. She was someone else entirely, someone with purpose. Then, as the footage continued, something in the room changed. Samuel appeared in the doorway. He was smiling at first, but his expression quickly shifted to one of confusion and then concern. He walked toward Vanessa, speaking to her, but Michael couldn't make out the words. For a moment, everything seemed calm. Samuel was talking to Vanessa, trying to reassure her. But then something snapped. In a split second, Vanessa reached into her bag and pulled out a small object, something shiny. Michael's stomach dropped as he realized it was a knife. He had been so focused on the rest of the scene that he hadn't expected this moment to come. She lunged at Samuel, and the struggle that followed was chaotic. The video was shaky, the image distorted as Samuel fought back, trying to push her off. He grabbed her arms, but Vanessa was relentless. She stabbed him once, twice, her movements swift and calculated. Samuel stumbled backward, clutching his chest. But Vanessa wasn't done. She kept coming, her face twisted in something between anger and desperation. Samuel collapsed to the ground, his body limp and lifeless. Vanessa stood over him for a moment, breathing heavily, her face illuminated by the overhead light. The knife was still clutched in her hand, and as the camera captured the moment in painful detail, she dropped to her knees beside him. The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa's eyes scanned the room, almost as though she was searching for something or someone. But there was no one there, only the cold, lifeless body of Samuel Hargrave. For a few seconds she remained still, her hands trembling, her breath shallow. Then she quickly gathered herself, wiping the blade on Samuel's shirt before slipping it back into her bag. The image froze for a moment, capturing her final expression, cold, calculated, and strangely detached. Michael leaned back in his chair, his mind racing as the footage continued to replay in his head. He watched it again and again, each time hoping that something would change, that he would find a reason, a justification for what Vanessa had done. But the more he watched, the clearer it became. Vanessa had murdered Samuel Hargrave with intent. She had planned it. What the hell happened? He muttered to himself, slamming the lid of the laptop shut. Jenny was still standing by, watching him closely. So, that's it? She killed him. Michael nodded slowly, his mind still processing the scene he had just witnessed. Yes, but there's more to it. I can feel it. At that moment, Clara Rodriguez walked into the room. She had been reviewing the latest developments on her own, and she could tell from Michael's expression that something had changed. Is it done? Clara asked, her voice steady but with a hint of concern. Is Vanessa really the one who did it? Michael met her gaze. It looks like she did it, but it's not that simple. There's something deeper here. I need to know why she did it. This wasn't just a random act of violence. It was personal. But there's no clear motive. Not yet. Clara crossed her arms. So what do we do now? Michael stood up, his face grim. We need to find out who pushed her to do this. If Vanessa wasn't acting alone, someone had to have played a part in this. She's not the type to just snap like this on her own. I know it. The next few days were a blur. Michael and Clara dug into every aspect of Vanessa's life, tracing her steps in the days leading up to the murder. They revisited her interactions with Samuel Hargrave, searched through her phone records, and interviewed anyone who might have seen something that could explain what had happened. It wasn't until they spoke to one of Vanessa's old friends, Brittany, that they uncovered a shocking piece of information. Brittany confirmed that Vanessa had been seeing someone, a man who had been involved with her for several weeks before the murder. His name was Derek, and he was no stranger to trouble. He had a criminal record, and it seemed he had been in Vanessa's life right around the time she had started to spiral. The more they learned about Derek, the clearer it became that he had been the one to manipulate Vanessa. He had planted the seeds of anger and resentment in her mind, convincing her that Samuel was controlling her, that he was trying to take advantage of her. Vanessa had trusted him enough to follow through on his twisted ideas. In the end, the truth was far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. Vanessa hadn't acted alone. She had been pushed to kill, manipulated by someone who knew exactly how to exploit her vulnerabilities. And as Michael stood in the quiet of his office, staring at the case files in front of him, he knew one thing for sure: this was just the beginning. But as the investigation reveals more about Derek's involvement, Michael realizes that the true motive behind Samuel Hargrave's murder was far more chilling than anyone could have guessed. The investigation had reached a breaking point. Michael Green sat in his office, surrounded by case files, pictures of Samuel Hargrave, and notes on Vanessa and Derek. The deeper he dug into their relationship, the more twisted the picture became. Vanessa had been manipulated, there was no doubt about that. But it wasn't until they dug into Derek's past that they uncovered something truly unsettling. Derek, it seemed, wasn't just some random figure in Vanessa's life. He had been involved in several incidents in the past, each more troubling than the last. A criminal record, charges for assault, and a history of controlling relationships. He had a long track record of using people to get what he wanted. And Vanessa had been the perfect target. But as Michael went over the timeline, something didn't add up. Derek wasn't just a bad influence on Vanessa. He had been a key figure in Samuel's life as well. In fact, Samuel had known Derek, though not in the way Michael initially thought. The two had crossed paths a few years ago when Samuel had helped Derek get out of a legal bind. He had paid off a significant portion of Derek's debts, even going as far as to offer him a job. Samuel believed he was giving Derek a second chance, a chance to turn his life around. But what Michael had learned was that Derek hadn't taken kindly to this help. Instead of being grateful, he had become bitter, resenting Samuel for putting him in a position of owing something. The more Michael pieced things together, the clearer it became. Derek had seen Samuel as a threat, as someone who was holding him back. And when Vanessa became involved with him, Derek saw an opportunity to use her to take down Samuel once and for all. Michael's phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was Clara, her voice sharp and urgent. "Michael, you need to get over here. We've got a lead on Derek. And it's big." He didn't waste any time. Within moments, he was in the car, speeding toward the station. Clara was waiting for him in the interrogation room, her face tense as she paced back and forth. "What's going on?" Michael asked as he walked in. "We've got Derek," Clara said, nodding toward the one-way mirror. Behind it, Derek was sitting in a holding cell, his arms crossed, a smug look on his face. "We got a tip about his whereabouts. He's been hiding out at an old friend's place, but we're not sure how long he's been there." Michael's mind raced. They finally had him. But there was still one big question that loomed over them. What did Derek know? Was he going to confess, or would he lie his way through the interrogation? They walked into the room where Derek was being held. As they entered, Derek's eyes flicked toward them, a smirk forming on his lips. "Detective Green," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I've been expecting you." Michael stayed silent, his gaze fixed on Derek. He had seen people like Derek before, men who thought they could manipulate their way out of anything. But Michael wasn't going to let that happen this time. "Derek, we know what you've been doing," Michael said calmly. "We know you've been using Vanessa. And we know you were involved in Samuel Hargrave's murder." Derek chuckled, shaking his head. "You think I'm going to confess to that? You've got nothing on me." Clara leaned in. "We've got plenty on you, Derek. Your past, your ties to Samuel, your involvement with Vanessa. It's all starting to add up. We know you manipulated her into killing Samuel. But you didn't think we'd find out, did you?" Derek's smirk faltered for a moment, but then he leaned back in his chair, looking as though he had all the time in the world. "You think you know everything, don't you? You think you've got it all figured out?" He paused, eyes glinting with amusement. "Well, you don't." Michael narrowed his eyes. "What are you talking about?" Derek's expression turned cold. "You're so focused on Vanessa, so focused on your little story of her being some innocent victim. But you're wrong. She wasn't manipulated. She didn't kill Samuel because I told her to. She killed him because she wanted to. She had a reason. And it wasn't because of me." Michael's heart skipped a beat. "What are you trying to say?" Derek leaned forward, his voice low and sinister. "The truth is, Vanessa didn't kill Samuel to protect me. She killed him to protect herself. Samuel wasn't just some mentor to her. He was someone who had something over her. She didn't want to be his pawn anymore. She was tired of being controlled." Michael's mind raced. He had known that Vanessa's relationship with Samuel was complicated, but this was a revelation he hadn't expected. Derek had just dropped a bombshell that completely altered the course of the investigation. "So, Vanessa wasn't just manipulated?" Michael asked slowly. "She killed Samuel because of something she wanted to hide?" Derek smiled, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Exactly. There's a lot more to Vanessa than you think. She wasn't the sweet, innocent girl you've made her out to be. She had secrets. Big ones. And Samuel knew them. He was going to expose her. That's why she killed him. Not because of me, not because of anything I did. But because of what she had done." Michael took a step back, trying to process what Derek had just said. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but it was still unclear what exactly Vanessa had been hiding. What could be so dangerous that she had been willing to kill for it? "Tell me what you know," Michael demanded, his voice hard. "What did Vanessa do that made her kill Samuel?" Derek chuckled darkly. "You'll have to ask her yourself." But as Derek leaned back in his chair, his smug smile never faltering, Michael knew that the case was far from over. Vanessa had killed Samuel, but the reasons behind it were still shrouded in mystery. Derek's confession had only raised more questions. What secrets was Vanessa hiding? And how deep did they go? The real twist wasn't just in the murder, it was in the fact that Vanessa had more to lose than anyone had imagined. And now, with Derek's cryptic words hanging in the air, Michael knew that the truth was even darker than he had anticipated. As Derek's twisted confession echoed in Michael's mind, he realized that everything he thought he knew about Vanessa was a lie. The true motive behind Samuel's murder was still buried, waiting to be uncovered. The weight of Derek's revelation hung heavily in the air as Michael Green sat alone in his office, replaying his conversation with the suspect. Every word Derek had said echoed in Michael's mind, and with each passing minute, the pieces of the puzzle shifted, revealing a more complicated and dangerous truth. Vanessa had not acted out of some twisted loyalty to Derek. No, this was about something much more personal. But what could be so dark, so damning, that it had pushed Vanessa to murder? Michael knew he had to find Vanessa, to hear the truth straight from her. The cryptic statement Derek had made about her secrets seemed to hold the key, but what those secrets were remained unclear. He was about to uncover a truth that would forever change the way he saw this case, and the girl at the center of it. As the night deepened, Michael was joined by his partner, Detective Clara Rodriguez. She walked into the room, her expression tense, and without a word, handed him a file. He glanced at it quickly, his heart pounding. It was a report on Vanessa's recent communications, texts, emails, and phone calls. "We've been going through her phone," Clara said, her voice quiet, "and we found something." Michael opened the file and scanned through the pages. At first, it looked like nothing more than a series of angry texts between Vanessa and Derek. But then something caught his eye, a string of emails between Vanessa and someone named R.T. The messages were cryptic, but Michael recognized the pattern. There was something more here than just angry exchanges. There was fear. Vanessa had been in contact with someone else, someone who had been blackmailing her. The email trail revealed a much darker story. R.T. wasn't just a random person. They had been threatening Vanessa, threatening to expose something terrible from her past unless she cooperated. The messages spoke of her betrayal, her crimes, things that could ruin her life forever. The last email had been sent the day before Samuel's murder, telling Vanessa that it was time to take care of the problem. Michael's stomach churned. This was bigger than just a teenager snapping under pressure. This was about survival. Vanessa had been living in a constant state of fear, and Samuel had become a threat in the final days of her life, someone who had known too much and was planning to expose her. He slammed the file shut and turned to Clara. "We need to find Vanessa now. She's been blackmailed, and if she's hiding something as serious as this, it's no wonder she killed Samuel." Clara nodded. "I'll have the team search her last known locations. We can't afford to waste any more time." As they moved out of the office, the air outside was thick with tension. The wind had picked up, and the streetlights flickered as though mirroring Michael's own uncertainty. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Vanessa was out there, somewhere, holding the last piece of the puzzle, the one thing that could either clear her name or bury her forever. The next few hours felt like days. The team spread out across the city, checking every lead, every possible location Vanessa could be hiding. Michael and Clara stayed in constant contact, sharing updates as they worked their way through the list of places Vanessa had been seen. It wasn't until the early morning hours when Michael received the call. "We found her," Clara's voice crackled through the line. "She's at an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. You need to get here now." Without hesitation, Michael grabbed his coat and rushed to the scene, his heart racing. This was it, the final confrontation. Vanessa had been running from her past, but now the truth would be revealed. As Michael arrived at the warehouse, he saw the flashing lights of multiple police cars and officers milling around, securing the perimeter. He quickly made his way to Clara, who was standing by the entrance, her face grim. "We've got her inside," Clara said quietly. "She's not resisting. But she won't talk. Not yet." Michael nodded, steeling himself for what was to come. This was the moment of truth, the moment when he would finally understand why Vanessa had done what she did. They walked inside together, the warehouse echoing with each footstep. At the center of the room, sitting on the cold concrete floor, was Vanessa. She was barely recognizable. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear, but also something else, defeat. She had been running, and now the end was near. Michael approached her slowly, his voice calm but firm. "Vanessa, it's over. We know what happened. We know about our tea, and we know you were being blackmailed." Vanessa's hands trembled as she looked up at him. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I had no choice. I couldn't let him destroy me." Michael crouched down in front of her, trying to make eye contact. "Who was our tea, Vanessa? What did they have on you?" Her lips quivered as she spoke. "I was part of something that shouldn't have happened. Samuel knew. He knew everything. And he was going to expose me. I couldn't let that happen. He was the only one who could ruin my life. I had to stop him. I thought I was protecting myself." Her voice cracked and tears began to fall. "But I didn't mean to kill him. I didn't want to. just happened. Everything, everything just came crashing down. Michael's mind raced as he absorbed her words. He had known that Vanessa had been pushed to the brink, but hearing her confession made the truth painfully clear. She had not acted alone. She had been cornered, manipulated, and blackmailed into taking action she never intended to take. Samuel was going to expose what? Michael asked, his voice soft. Vanessa shook her head, her face a mask of sorrow and regret. He knew about my past, my involvement in a crime I was never caught for. But Samuel knew, and he was going to make me pay for it. Michael's blood ran cold as he connected the dots. Vanessa wasn't just protecting herself from an ordinary blackmailer. She was protecting herself from a past that could have destroyed everything she had built, everything she had fought for. And in the process, she had murdered Samuel Hargrave, the man who had once tried to help her. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, Vanessa sobbed. I never wanted to be like this. But it was too late. I was already trapped. Michael stood up slowly, his mind reeling from the truth. Vanessa had been a victim all along, manipulated by forces beyond her control. And in the end, her fear had driven her to commit an unthinkable crime. As he turned to leave, he knew that the case was far from over. There were still many unanswered questions, about our key, about the crime from Vanessa's past, and about the true extent of the web of manipulation and deceit that had ensnared her. But as Michael walked away, he realized that the truth behind Samuel's murder was just the tip of the iceberg. There were still deeper secrets waiting to be uncovered, secrets that could destroy everything Vanessa had left. The truth had finally come out, but with it came a heavy weight. Vanessa Clark's confession had shattered everything Michael Green thought he knew about the case. The murder of Samuel Hargrave was no longer just the act of a troubled teenager. It was the tragic culmination of fear, manipulation, and a past that had haunted her for years. But as Michael left the warehouse that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that this case wasn't finished. There was still more to uncover, more to understand. Vanessa had killed Samuel to protect herself, but from what? The following days were a blur of interviews, paperwork, and emotional fallout. The city buzzed with the news of the arrest, but for Michael, it was more than just another closed case. It was a tragedy, a story of a girl who had been forced into a corner, where the only way out was through violence. But Michael had learned one thing: the full picture was still incomplete. The investigation into R.T. had begun, and the deeper they dug, the more questions surfaced. Who was R.T.? What kind of leverage did they have over Vanessa? And what crimes had Vanessa been involved in that could have led to her taking Samuel's life? These were questions Michael couldn't ignore, no matter how much he wanted to close the case. One afternoon, Michael found himself in a small cafe, sitting across from Vanessa's mother, Margaret. She had reached out to him, asking for a meeting, and though Michael had his reservations, he agreed. He knew that the woman was in pain, but he also understood the importance of hearing her side of the story. Margaret sat quietly across from him, her hands folded on the table. She looked older than her years, the lines on her face deepened by grief and regret. Michael could see the toll the past few days had taken on her. Her daughter was in custody, facing charges that could change her life forever. But Margaret didn't seem angry. Instead, she seemed lost, as if she were still trying to understand what had gone so horribly wrong. I never wanted this for her, Margaret said softly, her voice quivering. I thought I was doing what was best. I tried so hard to protect her from the world. But I couldn't protect her from herself. Michael studied her for a moment, sensing her pain. He'd seen it before, the guilt of a mother, the weight of the mistakes she felt she had made. But there was something else too, something unsaid, something Michael couldn't quite put his finger on. You did the best you could, Michael said gently. But sometimes people can't be saved no matter how hard we try. Margaret looked up at him, her eyes filled with unshed tears. Do you think Vanessa's a monster? Michael shook his head, his heart aching for her. No, she's not a monster. She's a victim. A victim of manipulation, fear, and a past that came back to haunt her. Margaret's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. What are you saying? You mean there's more to this? Michael paused, considering his next words carefully. There's more to Vanessa's story than what you've heard. She wasn't just trying to protect herself from Samuel. She was trying to protect herself from something much darker. Margaret's hands trembled as she reached for her coffee cup, her eyes searching his face. I don't understand. What could be worse than what she did to Samuel? Michael hesitated before speaking. I think Vanessa was involved in something before she ever met Samuel. Something that could ruin her life if it came to light. Samuel knew about it and he was going to expose her. She didn't want that to happen. She couldn't let it happen. Margaret's face turned pale, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came out. She set the coffee cup down with a trembling hand and stared at Michael, her expression a mixture of disbelief and dread. "Do you know what it is?" she whispered. Michael nodded slowly. "I think I do. But I don't have all the answers yet. The thing is, Vanessa was desperate. Samuel had been trying to help her, trying to get her on the right path, but she felt cornered. She couldn't face what she had done in the past, so she pushed everyone away. Even Samuel." Margaret buried her face in her hands, the sobs coming in short, choking gasps. Michael could see the years of pain and regret in her every movement. She had tried to do what was best for her daughter, but the world had been too cruel, too unforgiving. And now her daughter's actions had torn apart everything they had built. "I never knew," Margaret murmured through her tears. "I never knew that it was this bad. That she had a secret like this. I thought I could protect her." "You did your best," Michael said again, his voice firm but kind. "But some things, some people, can't be protected from themselves. Sometimes the world just catches up with you." Margaret looked up at him, her face filled with pain but also with a flicker of understanding. "What happens now?" she asked. "What happens to Vanessa?" Michael took a deep breath. "That's up to the courts. She'll have to face the consequences of her actions. But I believe there's more to her story than just this murder. There's still a chance for her to make things right." Margaret nodded slowly, her eyes clouded with uncertainty. "I don't know if she can ever make it right. But I just want her to be free. To be happy. To not have this darkness following her." Michael reached across the table, his hand resting briefly on hers. "Sometimes the darkness we carry inside is the hardest thing to face. But Vanessa has a chance. Maybe not to undo what's been done, but to learn from it. To find a way to live with it." They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. Michael couldn't offer Margaret any false hope. He knew that the road ahead for Vanessa would be long and hard, but there was still a chance for redemption. A chance for her to rebuild, even if it meant facing the harsh truths that had brought her to this point. As Michael left the cafe, the sky was just beginning to lighten, the first rays of dawn casting a soft glow over the city. He couldn't shake the feeling that the case wasn't over yet. Vanessa's story was still unfolding, and there were still pieces of the puzzle missing. But he knew one thing for sure: the journey toward redemption wasn't an easy one, and it was one that Vanessa would have to take on her own. As Michael stepped into the early morning light, he knew that the truth was only part of the journey. Vanessa would have to face the consequences of her actions, but the road to healing was still open, if she could find the strength to take it.